Welcome back to the Spewak Training Podcast. We are hitting our third episode and we are live from the Thrive Coast studios. Thank you so much to our producer, Bill Smith, for bringing this podcast to the digital world now that we're able to actually have cameras and taking the podcast up to another level, which is exciting. But today's episode is really special for me because I have not publicly spoken about having the two strokes that I suffered in October. I've obviously put them on social media, but I've been trying to find ways to share my story, and just nothing has felt authentic to me. But I had the opportunity to meet somebody else, unfortunate for both of us, that we've experienced, having a stroke. But we've both come together. Her name is Krysta Owings. She runs with our Spewak racing team, and I now have the great fortune to be able to coach her as she's preparing for the Paris Marathon and the Chicago Marathon with me next fall. So I figured no better person to come on camera with me and help me share my story and also hearing more about hers as we kick off our efforts to promote more of stroke awareness, our survivorship, and our journey ahead. Welcome back to the Spewak Training Podcast. This is episode 3. I'm here with my friend Krysta Owings, who I feel like I've known you forever, but it's actually only been like less than a year that I've actually known you. But this is our first episode that we have done with the Spewak Training Podcast in person with cameras around for us. So figured that we'd bring on a big guest for this if we were going to really bring out all the entertainment. Krysta, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Mark?
Doing well.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. I'm excited to share your story. I know a lot of people in our own community so far have gotten to know you and know a little bit about what you've experienced in your life. But I think this will be kind of a fun opportunity for us to really share our connection and being able to hopefully, inspire some people after this episode.
That's the goal.
This is, I was saying this to you kind of off air, off camera, that everybody pretty much knows that I had a stroke because I put it up on Facebook and Strava and every social media platform that exists on the planet. But I've actually never really spoken about it outside of like writing a post. And so this is my first time that I'm going to really kind of go into detail about my story. But I selfishly didn't want to do this alone because Krysta and I have built this relationship over the last few months, and I feel like, there's no better person to kind of walk this journey with than you, and to be able to share this just feels more special and authentic. But you're somebody who's done a lot of publicity with your story and things like that. And I'm curious to kind of how do you feel? We'll kind of dive into your story real quick. Like, how do you feel about kind of putting it out to the world and everything?
Yeah, so it's been, I think at first it definitely helps. You kind of battle with, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to keep it private? Do people need to know this traumatic thing that happened to you? Are they going to look differently at you? But I think it becomes very called self-soothing, or helps you go through this recovery process and just kind of work through some things. And then, if along the way you happen to find someone that has also been through these traumatic events, it can be really, really helpful.
That's something that I really admire about you, because I've obviously seen the press and things that you've done, and I feel like I didn't even know what you went through from you personally. I had to kind of read it through the internet to understand what you've dealt with, and so it's been really nice to kind of hear your story. But hearing your perspective is definitely very relatable. So do you want to just share? I don't want to steal your news, but it's been 11 years.
Yeah. Just about 11 years. So I had a stroke also. So Mark and I are in the same club. We like to somewhat say it's a good, bad thing. So I had a stroke when I was 25 from an AVM, which is just something that you're born with. So I had a craniotomy to remove it. And then, from that, I had, lost the ability to walk, some mental function, and just telling time, and very simple, easy, everyday things that I think you take for granted. And then, you learn those things back through inpatient care, which I did for, I think it was around, I don't know, the timeline is fuzzy, but I was there, I did the work, and then you kind of get out of the other, onto the other side, and looking back on it, it still is amazing that, like, not amazing, but just, I guess it amazes me the fact that that actually still happened to me. Like, to this day, you said, oh, like, you had a stroke. Like, I don't, it's so hard to believe that when it actually happens to you, because it's such an out of the ordinary thing, right? Like, we're both young, we both had strokes. It doesn't make any sense at all, but still, it happened. But we're also still here, which is, I think, the number one thing.
Yeah, I admit this, obviously I've already admitted this to you, but I knew your story, and just to kind of back up to give everybody kind of some perspective. So we've connected through the Spewak racing team. Krysta joined the team last May or so, right?
Yep,
right around then.
a year.
Yeah, and so we were connected through there, and then I had the opportunity to start coaching her recently, and so we're connected through the world of Spewak running entities.
Yeah.
And when anybody ever joins the racing team, I would say I always do a little bit of deep diving on the internet, do some Facebook stalking. And so I would never share this with anybody, obviously, that I'm actually, out there on the internet stalking you. But
we all do it,
yeah,
I think.
So I searched Krysta, when she's joined the team. And on your profile, your story of your stroke came up. And it's crazy to me because I remember reading it, and it hurt me reading your story, because I just couldn't imagine this super fit, nice, just kind, energetic, positive person that's been coming around had experienced something like this.
Yep.
And also it made me start thinking, uh-oh, is it okay she's coming to our workouts? Is there going to be an issue? It was just
I
some
can't
ignorance.
say anything now.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't any judgment, but I definitely think there was a little bit of, on my end of things, looking at you in a different way, just because.
Yeah, I mean, it's very normal.
Couldn't believe it. It just, and so I remember you coming out and doing the speed work last summer and just being amazed by you, and just so inspired. And so I look back at this, but I think I read your story again, literally 2 days before I had my stroke. And I always think about that. I read the story again, and it's just so weird. It's chilling to kind of think that I was reading about you. And so Krysta gave me a stroke. Just kidding.
That's actually what he told me.
Yeah, I think that was first things I said.
It's do not join the club.
Yeah. You have been very vocal, and you've obviously, your story is very unique because, you weren't, initially diagnosed with obviously, what you ended up having and what you experienced. Could you share a little bit more about that process? Because I think that's something as young survivors that we didn't understand before we had it. And I think a lot of people struggle to understand, what is a stroke and what does it look like?
Yeah, so I think that one of the main things, at least, so going through it myself, my vision was blurry. I was having trouble just kind of concentrating, had a little bit issue just with balance. It was so minor, and it was things that, it's like a headache. You kind of do something, take a pill, and then just think that it's going to get better. And, if I had just ignored it, who knows my brain was actively bleeding, so I probably wouldn't be here right now. And I happen to have a very, very amazing friend who said, no, I'm going to take you to urgent care right now. And that was the end of it. So she took me to urgent care, and then I ended up at the hospital, and the whole time, I'm telling people and thinking, I'm not having a stroke. You guys are crazy. I'm not the crazy one. You're the crazy one. I just can't see. It's fine. So I think there's the lack of, just, we can tell you as many times as, we can possibly try that these are the symptoms and this is what you should do to get help. But even when you're in a situation, you might not believe your own body. And I think that is important, as well as just realizing that just because I was 25, just because you were however old, 32. I don't tell anyone. Just because that's the thought that you have in your mind doesn't necessarily mean that you are invincible. So things can happen to you at any age. And I think there's such a stigma around what kind of age you have to be to experience something like a stroke. Like, look at us, we're not 80. And I'm not saying that, like that can come off, wrong, but there is a demographic age-wise of what a stroke looks like. And the truth is, it doesn't look like anything.
And it's so different for every person. And I think that's what I've learned, about having a stroke and how it looks for other people that have experienced it. And I appreciate you sharing kind of, what it looked like for you, because I think that's the biggest piece, is that because we aren't looking for it at our age, and on top of it, a lot of us are just not educated on what the symptoms are and, what you're going to really experience in those moments. You're just not sure, and that the whole thing with stroke is about the response time. The faster you can get treatment, the better the outcome. And that was a piece for both of us that we're lucky and grateful that there was people that, kind of pushed us into that situation to go to the hospital, and get that care, because our lives could be, tremendously different if it wasn't for that. And I have not really ever talked about this, I would say, outside of like telling Katie, and maybe you and a few other people, but I, like I said, I figured I would, share my story. Our producer, Bill Smith, here, he's been encouraging me for a while to share my story, and I've been very grateful for that. But like I said, I did not want to do it in a way that was going to be like, inauthentic to myself. Like I wanted to do it in a very comfortable way. And so, like I said, selfishly, I was like, I feel like I'll steal somebody who's already been out there publicly, there, and she'll lead the way, for me. But I'll share kind of what I went through, so that people kind of have an understanding that, that no story is the same, and why you need to kind of be cognizant of all these symptoms. So I look at Friday, October 3rd, and I'm sure you look at your anniversary date totally different, right?
It's a day. It's a milestone of a day in your life that you will never forget.
Went to bed on October 2nd, had the best day. Like, it was just like one of those days where you just like, you're in sync. So we, Spewak Racing, as you know, sponsors the St. Louis City cross country team, a high school called Confluence Prep. And they had me out to their cross country practice the day before to run them through like their first ever real cross country practice, like at a park, because Confluence is downtown and they don't really have opportunities to run around grass lot. So Coach Vincent, shout out Coach, and the team let me kind of lead practice that day. And I remember I just had like the best day. I ran that morning, lifted that afternoon, went to the practice. It was, as you know, early October. I was sweating. It was so hot out that day. And I got home, and I'm calling my buddy Sonny on the way home from there, because Sonny and I are always on the phone together, doing a lot of talking. And I'm talking to him on the phone and just telling him, man, this is such a great day. I had a blast. It was awesome. I'm just so grateful. And I got home, and I remember Katie, my wife, she works a lot, obviously, for great purposes. She loves her job and loves working, but we kind of live a different, sometimes, night schemes. And part of that is because sometimes she's on TikTok at the end of the night, winding down, and I'm still eating like Oreos and candy and other things. So that adds a little bit of a divide at the end of the day. But I'm at the kitchen table, I remember, just like pounding Oreos like later that night after I had dinner and everything. And I'm just like, there's just, if you think of Mark Spewak, you think that's his day.
It's like just living the dream.
Having the dream, just having a great time. I think I was texting my friends. I actually think I was telling them about all the Oreos I was eating. So I go to bed and I wake up, and I'll never forget this. Like, I woke up before my alarm, which was like, not super uncommon. But when you wake up before your alarm, you feel, you feel good. Like you typically are in a place where like, oh, I can jump right out of bed. So like my physical feeling was pretty good when I woke up that morning. And Katie had left like 5-10 minutes prior to me waking up. She went out for a run. Let's say it was like 4:45 in the morning. And she got outside, and then she turned around like within a minute of her run, no exaggeration, and just said, like, I just don't feel right about being out here. And she turned around and came home. And if anybody knows my wife, like, she doesn't skip out on things that she's going to do. That's just not her. She's a very dedicated, disciplined person. So she ends up coming back, and I literally got up out of bed and I stood up, and the first step I took out of bed, I just could not stand up. Like I was running into the wall, and I had this ringing in my ear, the ringing in my eye. And I remember I was just like, it was kind of like being drunk in a lot of ways. I was going down the hallway to try to get to the bathroom, and I'm like hitting the wall, things like that. And I'm just thinking, too many Oreos, got up too fast, whatever that looks like. So I get into the bathroom, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, oh my gosh, like you look horrible. Like you just see something bad on your face.
Yeah.
And so I go out in the hallway and I just lay down on the ground. And I just didn't really know what was going on at the time. For those, I think a lot of people have followed my story. They know I had a CSF leak prior to this, which is basically like a hole in your spinal cord. And so a lot of the symptoms would be like these crazy neurological issues. So my mind was never going to stroke. My mind was going to, I'm having something happen. This is just something that I'm experiencing. And I wouldn't say I was like super worried about it, but I definitely was like, this isn't normal. So I'm laying down, and Katie, I think, will be okay with me sharing this. She thought I was having a head rush. So she was like, you're just having a head rush. So you just need to lay there and you'll be fine. You'll get up. I have these all the time. And I was like, okay, she's right. I'm having a head rush. So I somehow got back to the bedroom, and I laid in bed, and Katie was like, I'm gonna come downstairs and get you. I'm gonna go upstairs. I'm gonna set a timer for like 10 minutes or so. And she still contests to this day that it was 10 minutes that she came back. I swear it was like 20 minutes. Like I think she started the timer when she got upstairs, and I started the timer in my head when I was in the bed. Yeah. So I'm laying there just thinking, am I having a panic attack? What's going on? And now the room is just getting like way busier. Like I'm just like starting to see things, like everything is just like kind of closing in on me. And I just noticed like things were spinning. And so I'm laying there, Katie comes back downstairs, and my whole thing is like, under no circumstances am I leaving this house in an ambulance. We live on a corner street, like dead end street. I'm not gonna be the talk of the town at 6 a.m. Like they're gonna come with all the bells and whistles, when they call an ambulance. I'm like, this is not happening. So I really kind of like was fighting this in my head for the first, it felt like it was hours, but it was really just minutes. And I was just thinking, okay, what's going on? I'm having a panic attack. Like, what am I experiencing? Well, I can't really see that well. I'm very dizzy. I'm starting to feel nauseous. Like things were progressing, and Katie comes back and is with me, and I drank some water, and I remember she got my phone for me, and I looked at my phone, and like the numbers and things were coming off the screen, and I couldn't catch them. And I was like, I can't text. Like I cannot text. I was telling her that. So that's when I really realized like, this is probably gonna be a trip to the hospital. Now I didn't think I was going in an ambulance still, because I was like, yeah, I could probably get myself there. But once I realized that I couldn't get clothes on, and that that Katie was basically just gonna have to carry, a 180 dead body basically to the car to get me there, that would have been extremely unfair. So I remember just thinking like I was getting sicker, but I also knew like I had to call the ambulance no matter what. Like we've exhausted all options. So the ambulance comes, and I remember just hearing them. You hear them from like a mile away, and it's such a surreal feeling, because like you're laying in bed and just thinking like, okay, like something's going on. I've been slurring my words a little bit now. Like it just started to really just keep progressing, which is so weird, because when my eyes opened that morning, I thought I was just about to have a normal day. And so on a side note, like I'm having Katie like email, text clients. I was still aware enough to be like, all right, cancel my 10 a.m. session, cancel this call, things like that.
Which is amazing that you could.
I have no idea how I was doing that.
Priority number one.
Yeah. Focus on the work. Yes. That's the most important piece.
Then I'll get my ride.
Yeah, exactly. So the ambulance comes, and they got me in. They basically they put you like in like a blanket or something, because they can't like get the whole stretcher in the house, So they put me in the blanket. These really buff, tough dudes at Webster EMS, shout out, they were awesome. They knew immediately that I was having a stroke, and they were huge advocates for us going to Mercy South because it was a level 1 stroke center. And my wife and I, we were told by our doctor, like, go to MOBAP, like, go elsewhere. And the EMS was basically like, you should be going here. If this was my wife, I'd be going here. And so finally, I know Katie, it was hard for her, but she was just like, okay, we're going to Mercy South. That's the closest stroke, center, level 1 center. And the rest just like got, just crazier and crazier as it went on. I got into the ambulance, I remember, and it's funny because there's a guy at the Webster Fire Department. He used to be on the racing team. Shout out Nolan Park. And it's like middle of having a stroke. I'm asking the EMS guy, yo, do you know Nolan Park? He's a runner. And the guy's telling me, oh yeah, he's a great runner. He's always kicking our butts and BT tests, things like that.
Still chatting away.
Yeah, still chatting away. I'm just thinking, all right, well, I'm in this, whatever. And at this point, I'm really dizzy. I'm nauseous.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't really see that well. I'm speaking very weirdly. But at the same time, too, like, we're kind of and I'm sure you experience this a little bit, too. Like, you're kind of yourself still.
Yeah.
And if you have a distance runner mindset, nothing's really going to, affect you that much.
You're going to keep going.
And then I started vomiting all over the ambulance. And once I started vomiting all over the ambulance, I knew that there was definitely a problem. Now, at this point, I still believed I was having, like, a diabetic, like, coma or, like, reaction. Like, I just kept thinking, the diabetes, it got me.
So did you throw up Oreos?
Well, it had to been. That was the last thing, known that I ate. So it was probably all Oreos. Sorry for the graphics, everybody. It's
desk.
Yeah, and then that was the last thing I ate. So it was, definitely the Oreos I ate. And so I'm in the ambulance and I'm just like getting super sick. And I just remember being like, okay, this is probably, something's happening. My body's going through it. And I was aware of the fact that they were calling for stroke because of like what they were saying, but still at this point, you don't believe it, and I'm sure you felt the same way. Got to the hospital, you're met with like 6 people, and they told me like right before I got into the ER, they're like, we're gonna be putting you in and it's gonna be really overwhelming, just wanna let you know, there's gonna be people right around you, but that's how they do this, like that's how they get your help first. So they immediately grabbed me, did some tests, tried to get my legs up, couldn't move my legs, couldn't move my limbs, but I thought I was moving them, and they're so encouraging in that moment. Like, oh, good job. Yeah. And I'm just thinking like, I can't even lift my leg right now. Like what's, good job about this. And they immediately put you into the MRI machine. They first did a CT scan and then they did an MRI. And I just kept thinking, for all these years I've had to get MRIs, it takes forever to get an MRI. So sorry to the person I kicked out that morning at 7 a.m. because I got a first class visit to the MRI with no issues. And then I'm really sorry for the person that had it after me because then I'm in the CT scan and then into the MRI and I just keep vomiting in the MRI. And if anybody's ever been in an MRI before, it's already claustrophobic and it's already, a really small contained area. And I'm just like so sick. And I remember them asking me, like one of the head nurses was like, do you think you might have some food poisoning? And I just said, I probably made no sense. I had Oreos last night.
You're still thinking it's Oreos.
I think it might be something diabetic. My grandpa was diabetic, so I think that might be, something that's going on here. So, they got me out of there. And that was a painful experience just being in there.
Sure.
Because you're just kind of trapped and you're still so sick and they have to get these tests done.
Yeah.
And so they got to do those tests. And they wheeled me, obviously into the ER, recovery room, wherever they put you into a room. And I just remember the doctor walking in and she gave me the results, with my family there and just kind of said, I'm really sorry to be the one to tell you, but you had a stroke. And I'm just like, no. Like, just thinking like, just disappointment. Like, just like really sad and upset and like embarrassed a little bit. Like, just like felt like a failure, like just hearing that. And I just remember she was just so kind and so nice about how she approached it. She was like, I'm so sorry to be the one to deliver these news. Like, just very empathetic in terms of how she approached it. And the rest kind of, was like, boom, they put you right into the ICU. You get there and it was kind of like kind of a blur in the sense of
overwhelming.
Like, yeah. I mean, you remember it obviously. Like you get in there and they put you through kind of the ringer. With all the tests. And the last story I'll share kind of from the hospital perspective was there was this young woman who was supposed to do the bubble test for my heart. And basically what they're looking for in your heart, because a lot of young people have strokes because of a PFO, which is basically a small hole in your heart. And you'll never know in your life if you have a small hole typically until you have a stroke. And some people won't have any symptoms. They'll live the rest of their life with a hole in their heart and they'll never know. But for, I think like 25% of the population, they have this condition. So all of this to be said, like I ended up like, having to get this test, and the woman came in and she I guess came and did this test because she found out that I was young. And that was the whole thing. Like, was this for you? Like, was everybody so shocked how young you were?
Yes, absolutely. From, I would say 99% of the doctors and nurses and family, it was just like, okay, who's the patient? Actually, that is a question that was asked. So I was in inpatient care, and I'd finally gotten to the stage where I could walk. So I'm standing at the sink, and this lady, one of the nurses, had seen me when I first got in, when I couldn't walk. So I'm standing there, washed my hands, because I could finally do that, which is fantastic. And my mom's, sitting in a chair, like in the corner, I think, and she walks in and is looking at my mom, and I'm like, actually, remember me? Yeah. She's like almost dropped to the floor because she could not believe it, because it was just, over the course of a week, your body being young is to your advantage, and unfortunate, for us, it's a great thing. But yeah, just to your point, oh my gosh, they're so young. Because we are.
And it's like when you hear that from like nurses and doctors and things like that, like it's just like, like I remember they said, like when I first initially got into that room, they said we thought this was like a mistake, like an accident, because there's no 32-year-olds coming in typically, with a stroke. Mm-hmm. And so I had found out later, a few days later, actually, when I was in the hospital, my heart stopped for 12 seconds on one day. I'd passed out doing like OT, which is basically occupational therapy, as you know. And when I passed out, they were able to like did another CT scan, and they found that I had a second stroke. And so it doesn't pop up on a CT scan typically until a few days after. So typically, I would say probably had that second stroke probably during the first day. Yeah. And I would probably say it was during the time that this poor woman came in to do this test on me, where she kind of assumed that, oh, this is a young guy, I'm gonna have a good time, this would be fun. And then I vomited all on her. Now at that point it was all water. Yeah. But I just felt so sorry for her. I was like, I'm so sorry. But to find out, you had this second star. And yeah, I mean, I think like one of the things that's really hard to look back on from that experience, like in being in the hospital for 6 days myself. I know you were in the hospital for how long?
Maybe 2. I think it's 2 weeks, but I believe it was more closer to, I don't know, definitely longer than that. Okay. There's no way it was 2 weeks. Yeah. I think it was longer.
Because I was in the hospital for 6 days, and I was in rehab for 10 days. Mm-hmm. You were?
Yeah, so maybe closer to a month. Uh-huh. But I don't think my mind's going to let me think that it actually happened, that I was in the hospital for closer to a month than 2 weeks. That sounds easier on the brain. Yeah. It's just, just a few days. Yeah, it's just a couple meals. Yeah, we couldn't see. That's it.
Yeah, and at that point in time, you're just thinking, it's just your life becomes your new normal, when you're in there. And it's so much about attitude and mindset. And I just think the hardest thing looking back now is like the experience, I'm sure for like you, is like your family, and like thinking about how your family had to deal with this and what they went through every day to come visit you, and I was very grateful because my parents and my wife are there every day. And I know it's the same for you, like with your family. Like we're very lucky that we have incredible, support systems that were there for us during that time. And I mean, I was in this position where I was experiencing it, so I never had fear or never had this like super down attitude, but then like later to find out that Katie, the day that I passed out and my heart stopped, they did the code blue or over the announcement and kicked everybody out of the room. And I was like, green and out of it. And, Katie thought she just watched me die, and I don't remember that. And I don't remember that being a feeling that I thought I was dying, there was a moment in the actual like stroke, like when I was in the MRI machine that they talk about, like you start to see up. I was like, I think I'm seeing up right now because I can't stop vomiting and I'm so sick. I'm like, and I just remember thinking like, oh, I'm this big tough guy. Like I'm so tough. And if I ever was faced with death, I wouldn't be scared. That's what I always thought. And then I remember being in that moment being like, oh my gosh, if this is how I go out, this is horrible. Like, this is not how I want to go out. Like, I do not want to go out this way. Don't make this my last minute. Like, this just sucks. And so to think about that, that piece of it, I think is the hardest. And, and thinking like our families experience something that's so traumatic. And it's traumatic for us, but then it's also really traumatic for them.
Yeah.
And that makes it really difficult in itself. And I think that kind of leads me to the next piece that I want to talk about, because, we both have obviously shared our stories and people understand that we've had these strokes. But one thing that's similar between the both of us is that we are resilient people and like we want to keep fighting, we want to keep living. And so now we have like this next phase of life, which is awesome. And so I've been actually fortunate enough to be able to start coaching Krysta. She's preparing for the Paris Marathon, and then she's preparing for the Chicago Marathon next fall. But I just would love you to share a little bit more about like, how did you choose to have that mindset that you were going to keep pushing, even though knowing you just went through this like really traumatic thing that changed your life forever?
Yeah, I think once going through that, it's, could go one of two ways. You could just say, oh, I'm just going to be stagnant and just let life take me along, or you can change your, mindset, your attitude, decide what you want. Do you want to get better? Do you want to run again? Do you want to ride horses? Do you want to have dinner with your wife? Do you want to, go to family dinners and all the wonderful things that go along with it? I think for me, there was no question about it, right? Like I was going to get back to who I was, or as close to it. I mean, that was my goal, and I think that filters in, to everyday life now. It's like, because when you lose something for a moment in time, like your ability to control your brain, your body, bodily, throwing up or not, like that is such a huge impact on a person's self that you're gonna fight as hard as you can to keep that and never let it go, and also stay as strong as you can so that you can, should anything, I don't know, it's a balance between, you want to stay strong, and I think there's also the silent part that's kind of telling you, well, if you just make sure you stay this way, like strength and endurance wise, because that's what saved you the first time. I think it's a little bit of survival mode at some points, but it's either that or you give up. So,
well, you're such an inspiration. Like your positivity, and like that was something that like I read a lot about, like in those articles about you, and that's like what really helped me. Like when I knew that I had dealt with this, and then I knew that I knew at some point we were going to connect about this. I figured you probably would tell me, given that I told our team, and things like that. I was like, I would imagine we probably connect over this, but
maybe.
Who knows, when that will happen.
Be a little bit strange if we didn't.
Yeah. Hey, I just, didn't, disclose the fact that I also had a stroke too. I'm not going to help you. I did this on my own.
I'm not going to sign a waiver.
Yeah. You're like, I don't want to work with this guy as a coach. He had a stroke, I had one, but no, and I think that's, though, I read your attitude, and I saw that, you were a Division I equestrian athlete. And that was like, you wanted to be back to that normalcy. And that motivated me too. And like the time I found out that I had the stroke to the time I got to rehab and to now, like I felt like there's a clicking timer that I just immediately knew I'm getting back, I'm doing this, I'm going to push forward, and I think that's something that we both share, in terms of that like kind of relentless attitude, which I admire so much about you. And I'm so grateful that we've connected. And I think that what's really fun now about coaching you is it's like really cool to think like a stroke survivor could coach another stroke survivor and like really
amazing.
Understand each other in a way that nobody really ever will understand each other. And that's led us to doing the Chicago Marathon next fall.
Yes.
And we'll kind of tease this, and I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast here very soon to help with this a little bit more. But we both are going to be fundraising for an organization called Team Teddy. And so when I was in the hospital and then when I got into rehab, I put on my whiteboard in rehab, I wanted to run the Chicago Marathon and I wanted to fundraise for Team Teddy. That was my goal. Team Teddy basically is an organization that is one about awareness of stroke. And that's why we really wanted to come on here and talk today, so that people can hear our experiences and have a better understanding of what that looks like. But second, they give support to stroke survivors, financial assistance and support and all the rest of these things. And so Teddy Bruschi was an NFL football player that I watched growing up. I didn't like him particularly because I was a Rams fan, but he won a Super Bowl after having a stroke at the age of 31. And then he had another stroke or a TIA just a few years ago. Yeah. And so his whole it's just amazing. And so his whole thing is about the comeback, because he came back for the Super Bowl and won it after having a stroke. And so his whole thing is he wants to support all these people on their stroke comebacks. And so that was my mindset when I found out there was an organization like that. Went on his website, bought $300 worth of apparel, bombarded them on Facebook and Instagram every day in rehab. I'm just searching Team Teddy.
You had a lot of time on your hands.
Yeah, a lot of time.
You kind of get bored. The puzzles and the coloring is just not enough.
The OT, get a little obsessive, but we'll have the opportunity to share that with Krysta. And she obviously, so I actually ended up getting into the Chicago Marathon. My wife and I, we thought we were going to have to do it through fundraising because the lottery is so difficult, but I got in. And still made the decision to fundraise separately. But then Krysta had the opportunity to sign up through their charity to run the Chicago Marathon. You want to just briefly share about that?
Yeah, so I'm very excited to run with Teddy's team, and having, Mark, you were the one who introduced me to it, and I think I've mentioned it before that not even thinking that doing something like running the Chicago Marathon, that wasn't on my list of possible things to do. And I think that's something that's really special about you, is that you kind of do make people believe in, other, things that they maybe hadn't thought of before. And so I do appreciate you for that. And then, then seeing it within this organization too, right, is this additional foundation that they're going to provide to stroke survivors, their families, and having that kind of assistance program that they have, in addition to research and, and all the other amazing things they're doing, is, that I really connected with the fact that, one, it's trying to, right, it's enlightening this, I mentioned earlier, like the stigma and that it's, stroke has an age, but it doesn't. And then also that it supports families, right? So thinking about my own family, and I don't know if you might feel the same way, but if my family didn't have the support, financially, or otherwise, how different would have, their experience would have been like. They're already going through a whole lot of, horrible things every day, to not have a burden. They were lucky enough, but not everyone is lucky enough. So it's, how do we help one family survive a little bit easier after being, in your wife's shoes, my brother's shoes, my mom's shoes, our mother's shoes, which they still need to get together.
Need to get you guys.
So I think it's so monumental in the way that, that is such a, I don't know if that everybody always thinks about that. It's like there's a survivor, and there's also the people behind that survivor, and how do you help everyone involved, with whatever they may need, because that looks a lot different for each person. So I think I'm excited.
Families are, that's the biggest piece. Like if you don't have that stability, you don't have that support, it changes the trajectory of how your recovery looks. Yep. And for both of us, like we can sit here and say we're relentless and resilient and all these things, but there were days in those hospitals that we needed a positive attitude, and that came from the people that loved us and supported us. And that's something that we'll forever be, indebted to. So I thank you so much for sharing this story with me. I can't appreciate you enough for, coming on here and being willing to do this with me and allowing me to have the platform to do so, because I was very hesitant to share my story, and I wanted to make sure if I did this, it was one with somebody that I care and respect so deeply.
Yeah.
And second, the piece is that we could use it for the greater good, which is to fundraise for Team Teddy coming forward. Now I think a lot of people are going to want to follow your journey. How would one follow, what's going on in Krysta's world?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at Krysta Owings with a Y.
And we also have had some requests for LinkedIn as well from our last episode, so maybe you'll find her on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn also.
You never know. Krysta and I will be doing some more stuff on the podcast and sharing a lot. She's preparing for 2 marathons, training her butt off. She's doing great, and we are looking forward to sharing more of our journey and figuring out ways how we can help others and especially inspire stroke survivors.